The tea is still hot in your mug, a small rising plume of steam curling into the cool morning air. You're standing at your kitchen window, watching the feeder you spent all weekend cleaning and filling with the high-grade seed, the expensive stuff, the mix that was supposed to bring them back in droves. But there's nothing, not a flicker of movement, not the familiar frantic flutter of wings, not the sharp, rhythmic tap of a woodpecker against the bark of the oak tree. The feeder hangs perfectly still, a silent monument to an invitation that has been, for some reason, coldly declined. Beyond the glass, the world seems quiet, too quiet. You look past your own property line, toward the house next door, where the lawn is manicured to a sterile velvet green and the new metal fixtures gleam under the rising sun. It looks pristine. It looks perfect. And yet, sitting here in the hum of your own quiet kitchen, a strange, creeping realization begins to take hold. The absence in your yard isn't an accident. It's a consequence. You begin to notice things you've been ignoring for weeks. The way the birds seem to skirt the edge of your property line, veering off in a sharp, synchronized bank the moment they reach the fence that separates your garden from theirs. It's almost as if there is a wall-heavy, invisible curtain stretched across the airspace between you. You step outside, the cool dampness of the grass seeping into your slippers. The air is still, but if you listen, really listen, past the distant drone of a lawnmower, you can hear it, the silence of a kingdom that has been occupied. You've been operating under the assumption that your backyard is a sanctuary, a neutral zone of benevolence where you provide and they feast. But that's a human way of looking at it. The reality is far more territorial. A complex, high-stakes game of political maneuvering happening just inches above your head. Your neighbor isn't just a person who likes a tidy lawn. To a series of decisions, perhaps a new, high-frequency motion sensor light, a reflective wind chime that glints like a warning, or the strategic placement of a shallow, decorative bird bath that happens to be positioned at the exact junction of two competing avian flight paths. They have effectively colonized the sky. They haven't set out to harm anything. They've simply curated their space to maximize their own aesthetic. But in doing so, they have accidentally redrawn the map of the neighborhood. Consider the sheer weight of what a bird actually perceives. They aren't flying through empty air. They are navigating a dense, three-dimensional tapestry of sensory information. To a chickadee or a sparrow, your yard isn't just a garden. It is a series of nodes, places to perch, places to hide, places to eat, and, crucially, places to avoid. When your neighbor installed those new, sleek garden ornaments, they didn't just add decoration. They created a localized psychological hazard. Birds possess an extraordinary, finely tuned sense of spatial memory. They track the environment not just by sight, but by a constant internal calculation of risk versus reward. When a bird approaches your property, its brain is constantly processing potential threats. It sees the glint of that metal sculpture next door, and it doesn't see art. It sees a visual distortion that interrupts its ability to judge speed and distance. It hears the subtle, high-pitched metallic whine of a wind chime that, to our ears, is a gentle melody. But to a creature whose hearing is tuned to the subtle rustle of a predator in the brush, sounds like a discordant, repeating warning alarm. They don't have the luxury of indifference. One wrong move, one moment of miscalculation of flight path, and they are vulnerable. So, they learn. They create a mental blacklist. Your neighborhood, once a hub of activity, has been marked with a silent, "Do not enter" sign. The scale of this shift is difficult to comprehend until you witness it in real time. Stand at your fence line and watch the flight trajectories. You'll notice that they aren't flying randomly. They are tracing invisible tunnels through the air, curving around your neighbor's property with a precision that suggests an avoidance maneuver. You are being pushed to the periphery of their map. The feeder you watch so faithfully is no longer in the center of their world. It is in the dead zone. You might try to move it, to change the seed, to add water. You're trying to tempt them back into a territory that they have already collectively decided is compromised. It is a quiet, brutal form of territorial displacement, and you are the only one who doesn't realize you've been sidelined. But there is a deeper, more unsettling layer to this. It isn't just about the physical environment, it's about the legacy of memory. You see, birds don't exist in a vacuum. They communicate. They observe each other's failures and successes with a nuance that we are only beginning to understand. If one bird encounters a source of stress, that sudden blinding flash of emotion light triggered at dusk, or the confusing reflection of a window-mounted mirror, it broadcasts a signal. It remembers, and more importantly, it passes that information down. The repulsion zone isn't just a physical barrier, it's a cultural one. A learned behavior passed through generations of local residents. Your backyard has become a place that is associated with a hiccup in their mental navigation. The intensity of this realization begins to dawn on you. You realize that your efforts to provide the kindness you felt in your heart every time you refill that tray have been interpreted by the local wildlife as a logistical dead end. You haven't been creating a sanctuary. You've been maintaining a historic site that the local population has moved on from. The frustration you felt earlier, the sting of being ignored, transforms into a strange, detached curiosity. You look at the feeder again. It looks different now. You aren't seeing an empty plastic tube, you're seeing the front line of an invisible conflict, a quiet border war where the stakes are simple survival. Everything you once took for granted, the way the sun hits the trees, the layout of the flower beds, the very angle of your neighbor's roofline, now reads like a complex architectural puzzle. You aren't just a neighbor living in a house. You are a participant in an ecological drama. The landscape has its own rules, its own boundaries, and its own political structures, all happening in the silent, shimmering heat of a Saturday afternoon. You realize that the problem isn't something you can fix by simply buying better birdseed. It's a systemic issue of urban geography, a collision between human convenience and avian necessity. As you lean back against the kitchen counter, the silence of the yard feels less like a void and more like a secret. You see the neighbor walking out to their own lawn, checking the same wind chimes, admiring the same light fixtures, completely unaware that they are the architects of this exclusion. They aren't villains, they're just people, living in their own bubble, just as you are. The difference is that you now see the bubble. You see the distortion in the air. You see the way the birds avoid the path. You've caught a glimpse of the hidden reality that governs the world just outside your window. The tea is cold now, a thin dark surface reflecting the room behind you. You don't pick it up. You stay there, watching the empty space, feeling the weight of the realization that your world is larger and far more connected than you ever dared to imagine. You look up at the trees, seeing the branches not as decorative elements, but as essential highway off-ramps. You see the fence not as a line of wood, but as an absolute, uncompromising divide. It's strange, isn't it? How something as simple as a bird's flight path can reveal the entire architecture of your neighborhood's unseen life. We walk through these spaces thinking we own the view, but we are only ever temporary residents in a landscape that belongs to a much older, much more complex set of rules. The birds will come back eventually, when the environment shifts, when the seasons change, or when the neighborhood dynamics finally, inevitably, reset. But for now, the lesson is watching. It's in the understanding that everything has a reason and that the quietest parts of our lives are often the ones where the most profound stories are being told. Do you ever look out at your own yard and wonder if the silence you're hearing is actually a message you just haven't learned to translate yet? What do you think you'd see if you could suddenly view your home from the eyes of the creatures that pass above it every single day?